That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about episode 7 of The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart, the final episode, which will be available to stream on Amazon Prime September 1st, 2023.
We made it. 7 episodes.
We did. The title of this one is Sturt's Desert Pea, which means have courage, take heart, which in the book was a growth that was mentioned a lot.
Do you have a pull quote?
I do.
Here, I'll read mine then first. The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart takes us on an emotional journey through the dangers of keeping secrets, the importance of creating our own safe spaces, and learning from our mistakes.
Oh, yes.
What's yours?
An often moving portrait of resiliency in the face of cyclical patriarchal trauma, where a bouquet of complementary characters support a blazing Sigourney Weaver as ringleader in this vibrant story of women.
Oh, I like how you included bouquet and blazing. So we'll talk about our overall feelings, but this episode, so we know from episode 6, Dylan and Alice got into a fight. So we see Alice, she stayed the night at her house. She wakes up in the morning after not letting Dylan in, and her coworker Lulu shows up. And Lulu sees her like, girl, and starts taking pictures of her. And then Alice is like, what are you doing? And she says, I need you to see yourself. And I'm sure I've seen this done in like other TV, special episodes of certain TV series where there's, an abuse episode. But it hit me really hard watching this, like how important of a tool that would be for like a friend, like to try to help you see what's happening. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was very powerful. And because she looks terrible, Dylan busts her upside the head, so...
Yeah, she looks a mess and she's bloody, and it's clear from what she's saying to Lulu that is not what she's thinking about right now.
And then Dylan, just such an abuser. He goes to their boss, who's I guess like a law enforcement person, right? Because they're like park rangers, mm-hmm. and tells this lady like an elaborate lie about Alice and how Alice was the instigator and she's the abuser. And then he throws her past at her because we know Alice kind of lied to get the job. Mm-hmm. Like she really doesn't have a college education. But this woman knew that when she hired her, that she didn't have any references. But he says, Alice lied about her education. Alice has a criminal background, like she killed her parents. So of course the boss is like, and then Alice freaks out. Like she starts laughing. So of course she's out of there. Mm-hmm. And then we move on to her, because Lulu says, well, let me get you out of here. But they make a pit stop, like where tourists are looking at...
They don't want her to be alone.
Right.
And Lulu can't be with her until the evening. So she goes on another tour, like as one of the tourists.
And she sees someone picking flowers, which is a big no-no. And she assaults this person. And then, of course, people are taking video. And then later we see Dylan with his co-workers who support him, and they all have the video. Mm-hmm. And they're like, yeah, we knew she was crazy. Mm-hmm. It's just like so unfortunate that Alice got roped into this. But...
well, you give people the very weapons they can use against you.
Yeah, so then Alice finally calls June after all this time, Sigourney Weaver's character, and says she needs help. So they come and get her ass. Mm-hmm. And then when she gets back home... Sigourney's like...
they don't even make it all the way yet.
No, they don't. They stop at the beach, and Sigourney's like, I need to tell you something. That brother of yours, 13 whatever years ago, that you thought was dead, he ain't dead. He's alive and well. Actually, the librarian adopted him, and he knows all about you. And Alice is like, are you effing kidding me? And runs off. I felt bad for June, Sigourney's mm-hmm. character, because it's just like, we'll get into it, but we learn more about her past, and it's just like... she really did try really hard to protect women mm-hmm. in general. And then, I got the sense she cared for all of these women. Mm-hmm. But, sometimes you have to be cold and a vault. She had to be a vault, like mm-hmm. a literal vault, to be able to do what she did, which is provide help to so many women. But the downside is she was kind of untouchable, right? She felt cold
and unable to accept help herself.
Yeah.
Because that would mean vulnerability and weakness, which is why she wouldn't take pain medication, because she thinks that means that she's welcoming death.
Yeah. So Alice, when she runs off from the beach, she ends up at the library. And it's very much like episode 1 when little Alice goes to the library. And of course, Sally's there, played by
Asher Keddie.
And then we learned something very interesting because Sally is like, "Oh, are you looking for this?" And she gives her like a random book, and
Well,
then
the Selkie story of the mermaids.
but which is a book that Alice read as a kid, but to the audience we don't know why. And they sit down and start talking, and this is when Sally reveals how she knew Agnes, Alice's mother, because if we remember from episodes 1 and 2, there's confusion as to how Sally knows Agnes because she's telling her husband, the cop, that she doesn't really know these people. But then we find out that she's in Agnes's will to be like the guardian of Alice. So clearly something's afoot. But what we find out is Sally and Agnes used to communicate using the books because that damn Clem was all up in her business and watching her. So what Agnes would do is like underline words in the book. And you know, that little card you put in the book. She would communicate that way back and forth. So Sally tells Alice, you know, your mom, her plan for you was to get you to Thornfield to be safe. So you're mad at your mom and you're mad at yourself, but really like you ended up where she wanted you to be. So that kind of helps Alice realize that she needs to be back with June and Twig.
Well, but she takes an extended leave getting to know Charlie.
She stays with Sally so she can get to know her brother.
She's trying to avoid it. But what I found really touching about that is, you know, because Clem grew up knowing how the women communicated with flowers. So these two women had to find a different way to communicate in their own way. And I think it's just so fascinating how, you know, not fascinating, but also depressing about how women have had to learn to communicate outside the realm of the control of men forever.
So final episode, the thing we've all been waiting for. What happened the day her parents died? What's in this police report? Because we know we never, like, Siggy had put it away. We never saw it.
Twig never saw it.
Twig never saw it. Of course, Alice doesn't know. So what's in the police report? Basically, we find out that that day that the fire happened, we know little Alice was in her dad's shed and accidentally caused the shed to catch on fire. So when the dad comes home, of course he's mad. He chases Alice into the house. And of course Alice is scared. She hides under the covers. And her dad beat her so bad that this poor little girl had broken bones and a collapsed lung.
Yeah, he was strangling her.
So that was a really hard scene to watch because we see the mom who's visibly pregnant watching her husband beat their child. And at first I'm like, oh my God. I just couldn't even process it because I'm thinking if my mom would have seen my dad hitting me like that, my mom would have jumped on his ass. And then that's when we see Agnes jump on Clem. And she knocks his ass out.
With one of his own carvings.
And she lights his ass on fire.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how the house caught on fire, is that Agnes had to stop her husband from beating their child. So she knocked him out and lit his ass on fire. But then Agnes suffered from smoke inhalation. And that's what caused her to die. Mm-hmm. But her baby didn't die.
And the inquest believed that she killed her husband in self-defense.
But we need to talk about this inquest. Because that police report read like an op-ed. Yeah. I thought the writing of that was pretty bad.
It did. It's trying to get across something. Because it's boring watching people reading, right? Which is what we're watching Alice do. So that I can see, based on how the book was written, which I thought was really corny, I think that's not too bad.
So then we fast forward 2 months and we see that Sigourney Weaver's still holding on, but she's not long for this world. Then we see that Dylan has text messaged Alice saying, "I miss you." And this heifer responds saying, "I miss you too."
I know.
And she's still staying with Sally. So then Sally sees her on the phone and she's like, "Listen."
She's her creeping on Instagram.
Yeah, she's like, maybe you shouldn't do that. And, Sally works for the library, so she knows about, like, information and all that. So she's like, I know how to block people and stuff like that. And then Sigourney also messages Alice and she ignores her. But then Siggy dies before Alice can talk to her, which of course is not how you want this to end. But I thought a really sweet scene before Sigourney dies is because she knows after she can't get in contact with Alice, and then Alice calls Siggy back, but she misses the call. She goes, "You know what I would love? A bag of chips and a gin and tonic." So we see her eating her little bowl of chips and drinking her cocktail.
And metaphorically, we hear the swarming of the bees which we're told means a new queen has been chosen.
And then we see that while she's drinking while I believe it's Candy goes to get her, like freshen up her cocktail, Sigourney has died, like dead to that rocking chair.
I thought that was well done because we see her kind of have a burst of memories and she just...
Yeah. Well, we also get the memory of Clem, Sigourney's son, at one point attacks her after she tells him that he's never going to inherit Thornfield, because we get a scene where Clem is like at the dinner table with all the flowers and Agnes talking about, oh, I want to go build a shed on the property so we can have a home. And then Sigourney's like, can you talk to me back here? And she goes, you were never.
There ain't gonna be no shed.
Ain't gonna be no shed.
Clem.
This is not your land. This belongs to the women. You don't belong here in that way. And he chokes his mama out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Twig has to help her.
Yeah.
And this is, again, isn't in the book, but with the added dimension of him being the child of a sexual assault, and a lot of her behavior suddenly makes sense.
Siggy's funeral was sad because all the flowers and a lot of men show up, which I thought was weird. Like who these men were. I mean, I guess the men of all the women who were flowers. That was peculiar. I would have expected only women at her funeral.
Sure.
No?
Well, they said the families of the flowers, so I don't know, maybe people reconciled.
Sure. Then the final scene is that we had mentioned, or Sigourney has mentioned throughout, that there's this tree that she one day wants to carve someone's name next to, like her true love.
That's a tradition of the women in her family to do that.
So we see that she had left a letter to everyone, to Twig, Candy Blue, and Alice. And we see that Candy Blue's letter starts with "my daughter," like you've always meant the world to me. So of course that's what Candy wanted to hear. Alice, we don't hear what her letter says. And then Twig, we don't hear what her letter says, but then she runs to the tree and we see that Sigourney carved Twig's name into the tree. So that was sweet.
And then we have another tree, like the pain tree.
Then the final thing is, that tree that Clem had carved Sigourney's face in, where it looks like she's screaming.
The one where he raped Candy at?
Where he raped Candy. All the flowers light that shit on fire. Mm-hmm. The end.
Which, the other side, the regenerative power, not just the destructive power of fire.
That funeral was long. Because it started during the day, and they didn't light that tree on till at nighttime. And then we hear Candy say that, or Twig, one of them, Candy, says that Sigourney wanted like a very simple funeral, but it turned into like this huge thing.
Like, yeah, she'd hate this. It made me kind of want the series to end. We fade out on the voice of Sigourney's narration, which I really liked. But I kind of wanted, this felt like the most fitting series ever to end on the folk song by Pete Seeger, "Where Have All the Flowers Gone?"
Yeah. So overall, I thought this was very well done. I didn't read the book, you did, but I understand that this screenplay is much better than the book.
Oh yeah, the construction of this is so much better, and I think really gets into what the themes of the book were trying to get to, but I thought less successfully.
I think Sigourney's performance is like award worthy.
I think she
really carries it.
She does definitely carry it.
But everyone does a fine job. But she does I think a spectacular job. Her accent is a little interesting. It does kind of evolve at a point, but aside from that, I thought she did a very good job. I think the makeup that's used to age and de-age her looks really good.
Yeah, I think
and her hair looks really good.
I really, really like her in this. I'd be surprised if there aren't some Golden Globe and Emmy nominations for her. But even if they aren't, I think this is a strong showcase of what she still has to offer us.
My least favorite thing, I think the sort of symbolism of the flowers and how they're used just felt like an accessory that I needed to be better explained.
Sure. But we get what the lost flowers are. We do get the Alice's letter because
I didn't mention that.
Sigourney tells her, like, I left you a book in the shed.
I did want to mention that because so Sigourney in her letter, the Lost Flowers is a book that Sigourney would, whenever a new woman would come to Thornfield, she would do like an intake basically, and write down their like
chart
H&P basically, and so she gives that to Alice. And then the final shot of the film is Alice sort of being told that, like, basically, like, she's going to take over. So I guess she needs to know these stories. But I kind of felt like, I didn't like that book.
Oh.
It felt like that was something that should be private. And that book has like all these women's very intimate details.
It's like
of
a
their
scrapbook.
abuse. Yeah, I don't know. That book made me feel a way, but I understand why Sigourney made it, and I understand that these women told this story to her to write down. But the way she's talking about it is like I had to write these stories down to like deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was too much for me to carry on my own, so that's how
I thought that was kind of powerful though, because
I think the book and what it represents for Sigourney's character is powerful. I just felt a way about her giving the book to someone else. I feel like I would have destroyed that book upon my death.
or requesting that take a look and then destroy it. But I think she's trying to pass on like this tradition of maybe this is a tool that you can use.
Yes, it does make sense that maybe Alice, if she's going to carry on with Thornfield, needs to adopt this practice. What would you give the series?
3.5.
I would give it 3.5 out of 5. Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.